Hi, everybody, and welcome back to day 2 of the Energy Storage Summit 2026 here in sunny London today, unusually somewhat for February. We are delighted to be joined by Jacopo Tosoni of Energy Storage Europe. And I'll allow Jacopo to introduce himself and the organization a bit more, but fair to say your remit is really looking at and working on policy around energy storage in Europe with a view to promoting and supporting deployment and development. Nice to see you, Jacopo.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Andy. Yes, I'm Jacopo Tosoni. I represent Energy Storage Europe. Used to be called EASE, now we're Energy Storage Europe since October 2025. We're an association based in Brussels, pushing for making legislation about energy storage better, knowledge sharing, communication, market intelligence. We do work on trying to understand where the market is going and what's next for energy storage.
Yeah, and in terms of that market intelligence, I guess it's only fair since you've taken the time to speak to us that we give you an opportunity to, I think this is, MS is a really useful reference point. You guys put it together with the market intelligence and analyst teams at LCP Delta. Do you want just a few words on, well, firstly, a few words on what MS really is, and then what are the latest findings? Where are we at today? And we take the conversation on from there.
Sure. So it's a European market monitor looking at energy storage. It looks at every energy storage technology. We published this version that you were showing, which is the 9.5 in December, because we hit 100 gigawatt of energy storage, which was incredible. I joined the association more than 7 years ago. We definitely would not have thought to get to that number. Things have changed. Also, the technologies being deployed, the solution being deployed have changed. We right now have 50% approximately of pump hydro out of that 100 gigawatt number and 50% battery energy storage system. A few years ago, we would have said 95% is pump hydro. The amount of batteries energy storage system being deployed right now is impressive. It's definitely dominating the new installations. Also, the maybe the thing we try to shed a light of is that, of course, we tend to talk about energy storage solution for the grid, but we're starting to see energy storage solution for industry decarbonization. Okay. So we have a section of the MS dedicated to that. It's very small installed base, very small. But the expectation is that in the next few years, it's really gonna grow. And then when we get to 2030, that's when the proper acceleration is gonna take place.
Okay.
We have ETS pushing industry to decarbonize. We have technology costs going down. So maybe it's something to keep an eye on. Here, the event is great. The room is full. Maybe 10 years ago, no one was talking about energy storage. Now everyone is talking about energy storage. Maybe the same is going to happen for thermal and industry decarbonization and solution for the industry decarbonization.
Sure. So just briefly on that and industrial decarbonization. So, typically, and not just in Europe, but also I think it's fair to say in North America as well, that sort of more distributed segment of the market has lagged behind. And I don't know if it's worth really going into the reasons for that, but I guess one of the reasons is that industrial decarbonization isn't that easy, particularly in terms of industrial heat processes and cooling processes, right? That's part of what we're getting at, isn't it, right? And as we as Energy Storage News, we haven't written that much about thermal energy storage as yet. We've done a few interesting things here and there. We're starting to see some bigger, starting to see the dozens of megawatt hour scale of projects now.
It makes sense. Again, we're talking about specific small projects at the moment. Yes, there is a technical challenge, but I think for the vast amount for the vast percentage of services that the industry needs to decarbonize, we're there. The technology is there. What is not there is, okay, I'm a policy person. Everything for me is policy, but what's not there is the regulatory framework.
Okay.
It's hard to install it. You don't get remunerated maybe for the system services you provide, or maybe you're not even allowed to provide system services. The uptaker doesn't really understand the solution. It's still a capital intensive solution. And so maybe you need to find a way to get cheap capital. And finally, you have grid fees usually and or taxation that kill your business because the regulator doesn't understand what is this thing that is being deployed and how should the grid fees that maybe are up to 30 or 40% of your total ownership cost be designed. And so yes, I think it makes sense that you haven't covered so much. I will push back. It's not about maybe the services that can be provided. It's about the policy that is not really allowed this sector to thrive or this specific segment to thrive.
Okay, so we're at a conference today which is like really largely focused on Europe. From my personal point of view, it's kind of sad that Britain isn't part of that European Union conversation. Let's not go into that side of it right now. But I think in terms of starting with industrial decarbonisation, but not limited to that, that is one of the, let's say, explicitly stated goals of European policy planning right now, right? And then we also have many other aspects like the electricity market design reform process that's happening right now. That includes member states of the EU setting targets for energy storage and making what's really interesting is energy system flexibility assessments on a periodic basis. So that's some really interesting stuff that's happening. But there is just a report that's come out from the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission that shows only a small handful of those member states, while I think nearly all of them are thinking about whatever kind of euphemism you want to use for not actually yet implementing it, haven't yet got to it yet. So what is the state of play there? And, what can the industry really do? Because, to an extent it's in the hands of the policymakers, but what can the industry do around that, do you think?
Look, it's undeniable that we don't have two countries in Europe or two markets in the European Union that look alike. Every single market has its own legislation, and despite efforts from the European Union to guide the member and say, this is what you should do, most countries lag behind. And that's a problem to attract capitals from abroad or from outside the European Union. The Joint Research Center paper you were mentioning is absolutely correct. We see very diverse types of services being remunerating, different type of state aid being there, different type of costs or grid fees or grid taxation, being there.
Yeah.
It's an issue. Everything is going the right direction, I would say. So there's no country that is really now deciding to go back to coal. The progress is not as fast as we would like it to see, but you're right. 1st of July, it's a day to write down, because that's when every single member state has to present their flexibility needs assessment with a clear understanding of what are their needs, including for storage, at different time frames. So not only looking intraday, but maybe a bit more than that, and explain how to take all that. The idea is that if there is a mismatch between the need and the forecast deployment, they are allowed and pushed by the European Union to deploy state aid. So not have to have this mismatch between what we need and what we deploy. So that's something to keep an eye. Honestly, Andy, the activity in Brussels here in these past 6 months has been pretty intense. We're talking about reopening the market design again.
Okay.
This is the news, or this is what von der Leyen has said as recently as last week. We have a lot of focus on energy security and how system services contribute to energy security. So 2026 is also the year where we see progress across Europe. There's two files, maybe people don't know them, but network codes and SOGL. These things are going to really impact in 2026. Whether you get remunerated for certain system services and how. And taxation. We have an issue of double taxation, for example, in Spain. This is also a file that, fingers crossed, is going to finally be dealt with in Europe in 2026.
Okay, super quickly, SOGL, sorry, slipped my mind right now. that would be?
It's basically what the system operator
Mhm.
can deal with everything related to system stability, and indeed, so therefore it's relevant for system services.
Okay. And I feel like there's a lot of different areas we could go into on a lot of the things you mentioned there, but they're kind of wheeling out the refreshments for the afternoon networking in here. So we're going to have to start to wind down a little bit. But I mean, I think one aspect that's really interested a lot of people at this conference. I mean, I want to ask you about the grid fees, for example, in Germany, never mind the double taxation, but I
No.
think maybe that's for a whole nother day, right?
Yes,
Potentially.
that's not before the after party. That's when you have time to decompress after
Yeah, where people
this
really
depression.
need to get things off their chest.
Exactly.
But I think one topic that's been in a lot of sessions this time, and like the conference, is something that has grown almost bit by bit and is, you know, really a significant part now, is the long duration energy storage LDES piece. And, you know, a lot of people are talking about the technical definitions of how you look at that and stuff. But I think one thing is that it's key in energy system planning. And from what I hear from some folks in the industry is that including yourself, actually, now I think about it, is that, you know, a lot of the EU positioning is really good and a positive step. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there could be more explicit mention, more treatment of long duration energy storage. How do you view that? And yeah, I mean, your thoughts, I guess.
We never did proper modeling. That's my hot take, and we never assessed correctly adequacy and stability for our system, and therefore we've always undervalued long duration energy storage. It has a huge play to role as we deploy more renewables, but already right now, I think the system is already telling us that something is not working, that there is huge amount of generation being curtailed. JRC, we were talking before, 100 billion, 2040, that's the assessment. We need to start thinking about deploying long duration energy storage. We've heard today about the work the UK is doing. BT is not in the EU. That's a great way to give, through cap and floor mechanism, long-term revenue signals, long-term visibility, and deploy LDS. I think you need these technologies, are technologies that are gonna keep costs down ultimately for consumers by preventing all these redispatch costs. What are we waiting for? Indeed, it's policy and policymaker have to step forward here.
Excellent. Jacopo, thank you so much for your time. Here at an exciting and increasingly noisy expo floor here around the ESN interview area. We look forward to hearing more from you in Energy Storage Europe soon. I think a lot of folks will have known about EASE, you know, European Association for Storage of Energy. This is the new incarnation, I guess.
Indeed. There's a lot of things coming. We talk about the market, the product. We've seen leaks last week about new legislation, which is going to introduce made in Europe for batteries. So keep an eye on what's happening, because policy really determines the rule of the game for energy system, for energy storage. And yes, this made in Europe set of provisions that are expected to kick in the next 3 years are going to have a huge impact on the market.
And do we know, well, seeing as how we're on the subject now, whatever, let's keep, but in terms of that made in Europe thing, is that around ensuring that folks are deploying domestic content? Is it about stimulating the manufacturing? Is it both? Is it a combination? Is it too early to say? Like,
it's a bit too early to say, but the idea of the commission, at least is what it looks like. It's very political, so not a lot of maybe transparency there. Is to slowly require certain components from battery energy storage system to be made in Europe. And these requirements to slowly increase. It's a way to, force off-takers to select certain solution, but also to kind of give a push to solution made in Europe. Maybe not by EU manufacturer, but at least made in Europe. So that's where we stand. But this is a leak. It's not legislation. It's not real legislation. Maybe we're gonna hear more about it in March. That's when we expect the actual rules to be published. So let's see. I will let you know.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much, Jacopo.
Thank you everyone.